In our top story this hour, has South African Airways been captured by certain leaders? The ANC Youth League says the finance minister, along with the deputy president, exploited SAA in order to create space for private business. The ANC Youth League says Gordan and Ramaphosa tried to collapse the airline to benefit companies they have interest in. The Youth League says when SAA was moved from the Public Enterprises Department to Treasury, the finance minister appointed a consultant who instructed the airline to take all opportunities to Bidvest.
Amongst those that we know at Bidvest is the Deputy President of the African National Congress and that of our government, Comrade ANCYL Ramaphosa. But who else is there? It is the minister himself, Gordan. Now, above that, you are told that SAA must close some of its routes, and amongst those routes are the most lucrative routes, which include the London route. And who must take over these routes were safely aware that it is ComAir, and who owns ComAir is British Airways. But who are stakeholders at ComAir, by the way, President? It is Bidvest and Comrade Pravin, who owns nothing less than 20% of ComAir. So what are we doing in essence? We are ensuring that we collapse SAA in order to create space for private business.
Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa denied the allegations. He says he has disposed of all his interests that may have created a conflict of interest upon assumption of his duties as Deputy President. Denying all financial interests in Bidvest, he says the allegations levelled by the ANC Youth League are baseless. We're joined in studio by Professor Sipho Siepe, political analyst. Mlondi Mkhize, ANC Youth League spokesperson, will join us in a bit. We also have Tsepo Khadima in studio. The lines are open, 011-542-2186. Good evening again, gentlemen, and thanks so much for joining us. I mean, we hear this rhetoric a lot in the sense that we have leaders that themselves are conflicted or compromised, wanting to preserve their own wealth, and therefore we're not seeing radical participation of black business in state-owned entities. Give us the context, Professor Siepe.
Well, I think, first of all, until the allegations are proved to be true, we should not get into entertaining them. What we can entertain are the issues of principle that are raised. One issue that is being raised is that where there are areas of conflict of interest, we must be concerned, especially when those might lead to a financial benefit. But the one will say conflict of interest is one of the things that we try to address. And in a sense, the Youth League is making that claim. But I'm glad that the Deputy President has actually responded to say he did dispose of all his investment, or he may have parked them. He's not involved in any business. But it still is also important whether the parties that he was part of are the ones who might be involved in government, especially in spaces where he's involved. When that comes, if he had any dealings with the Bidvest, if there are issues of Bidvest that may be related to Bidvest that come into a discussion, it makes sense that he should actually recuse himself from such discussion, because whether you're no longer with them, but the mere fact that you associate with them means that there is still an influence that you may have. And sometimes you must also understand that these companies, when they get politicians, because what you have here, you have a transaction of sort. The politician brings the political capital, and those with monies bring the money. And there is a transaction there that I'll protect you politically and I'll give you the money. So there is a symbiotic relationship there, and it might be even a corrupt symbiotic relationship. So what we're trying to do is, the principle must be that any decision should not have been influenced. It should be a decision that is based on merit. And where we think that your presence or association may affect, you then recuse yourself and you move away from there.
Yeah, but the appointment in itself is against the principles of good governance, because it's created an environment that is non-competitive. It flouts and goes against the provision of an equal society when it comes to opportunities. You can't take the whole lion's share and give it to one company because they happen to have monopolized all sectors.
Very interesting and not easy answers can be found to these very difficult questions. But let me maybe reflect on it this way. When Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa was sworn in as the Deputy President of the Republic, I made a public comment and asked and wondered whether it would not have been politically prudent had he not been made leader of government business, more so as he was still in the process at the time of disposing of his business interests to put them into a blind trust, as was announced at the time. And I think that the timing, there should have at least been a cooling off period, because the lack of that cooling off period, unfortunately, creates this type of a storm that we are now seeing. But that being the case, the question is that what can we learn going forward? I've made a point, I think it was even last week, that in the case of Minister Pravin Gordan, again, in terms of his investments, the issue is that the interest accrues to him in those investments. Whether he's made the investment directly himself or he's got an agent in the form of a stockbroker or a wealth management company that making those investments on his behalf, the reality is that he is the ultimate beneficiary. He's got the beneficial interest, and therefore it puts him in the line of fire when he now has to go and preside over the state-owned companies or departments that have to deal with private sector companies which he's directly involved in. And we saw that conflict manifest itself in when Oakbay's accounts were closed, when he was approached. Again, his business interest or investment interest, rather, in the banks created that question mark to say, well, was he acting in public interest or in terms of his constitutional duty, or was he acting in personal interest? So these are the issues that really need to be, I think South Africa needs to be able to discuss them and say, well, what do we do? By the way, we must recall that senior officials, particularly the director generals, there is a cooling off period that is imposed upon them, that when they leave government, they cannot within a 2-year period immediately start to work in an industry which the department was. But we do not have inward, we only have outward. So when they come in, again, there's no cooling off period to say we cannot put it. So the point I'm making, and I would like to emphasize, is this: I think it was an error of judgment for Deputy President to have been made leader of government business when he was still in the process of disposing of his business interests, because that certainly has put him in the line of fire. When we look at the timeline, when SAA was moved, for example, from public enterprises into National Treasury, and then this allegation now that there was a consulting firm that seems to have given a particular advice to South African Airways that seeked to, so again it created that conflict. But one other point, last point I want to make, Cindy, in this regard is this. It has always baffled me how particularly state-owned companies rely on outside consultants. The question that has to be asked is that, well, why do we appoint board of directors and executive management if at the end of the day all that they do, they become glorified larks who rely on outside consultants who are paid? We must not forget, I think per year we spend over 32 billion rand on consultants. That is certainly not sustainable as a government with the type of pressures that we have.
Let's look at the framework within Treasury in realizing the dream again of an egalitarian society where we can all share in the prosperity of this world, of this land, and the fact that it's perpetuated based on the framework of the, be it BBBE Act, be it the compliance when it comes to local production or the means of production and price sensitivity that government always implies. When we sit with a glaring situation, SAA #1 when it comes to jet fuel has been, the preferred suppliers have been the same companies for over 86 years. There's something very wrong with this picture. Why is it that it's not reformed, that government puts its foot down and say, you know, like Eskom has done, that at least 30% of your procurement needs to come from African blacks? Why is this not happening?
Well, why is not happening? It's the question.
If there's no conflict of interest, at least.
No, it's not only an issue of conflict of interest. It is an issue of whether the ANC, as a ruling party or a governing party, has had the courage to deal with the issues. What we have done, we have allowed people to praise us First, we adopted the notion of reconciliation. Of course, there was a challenge of having to make sure that we consolidate democracy. But now, 22 years later, we discover that we have not paid attention to the issue of the economy. This is why people are talking about radical economic transformation. The question that one raises, and Tsepo here has also raised it, that what is that prevents this government, this leadership, from embarking on those? One of the things that is being raised, it is the very black people who are in a majority who have sustained this white monopoly capital. It is even the suggestions that are being made, and to say, well, this is not governed well, then what they try to do, they think that you must go to a white company to deal with it. And these are the discussions that should happen in society. But it has been the weakness. I mean, it's actually, we must blame it on white supremacy, which is a belief that all our answers can come from only one section of society. But when I say white supremacy, I don't blame white people, I blame black people, because black people themselves are also white supremacists in the sense that they don't believe in themselves.
Yeah, but I think I want to go back to the conflict of interest issue, in the sense that there was, I think during the government of national unity, or at least around about 96, where there was a key cohort or group of what was then termed as the usual suspects when it comes to BE deals and having access to boards and making substantial wealth in the process, being in non or executive boards of these white monopoly capital, as we've become to term it. How then is that person expected to not preserve themselves? It's human nature to want to survive, and we expect them to buy into a notion of radical economic transformation that could jeopardize the very key positions and deals that they're affected into.
Even before Tsepo gets in there, the biggest problem that we had as black people in this country is that we wanted to be included. We suffered from a sense of our own identity and the issue of confidence. Even the concept of BE, affirmative action, we never asked the question about who affirms who. So when we came up with the BE, it was all about the inclusion of black people into, first it was an issue of ownership. So they are giving shares into existing companies that were started by somebody else and those companies were going to serve the interests of that person. So to invite somebody into your house does not make that person the owner of the house. So that was the first thing that happened. But it has always been incrementally about included. That's why we moved from ownership, then we realized that its shares are not working. Then we moved to what you call managing. Then now we are moving into skills development. But the notion of control, this is why if you listen to young people, they're saying our approach to the economy is not about inclusion. It's about changing the economic relations, which is very different from being affirmed by people who are in control. And that has been what, if I'm still in control, I'm going to determine the pace of transformation. And that is where we should actually be changing in terms of our horizon or the imagination. At the moment, we're still trapped in the geopolitical imagination of apartheid.
Yeah, and it's, the whole issue of transformation is polarized, because some would say, for example, with Minister of Finance Pravin Gordan, that him being there keeps the status quo. He's not necessarily pushing a radical agenda, therefore being the stumbling block, if you will, in the radicalism notion. What we see at SAA is it's not the first of its kind. Even then, under Transnet, it would, sell off, what was it, 20% to a Swiss airline, that partial
which
privatization.
Went wrong, we must
correct.
say,
Bain and
yes.
Company came in there and essentially looted their back and consulting.
Ill-advised them and took all the money.
So the rot or the issue is at the leadership level. And whose interests are they protecting if it's not for the benefit of the greater majority?
Look, Sinbe, I'd like to say this. When the first wave of black economic empowerment deals were put together, I was a young investment banker then. So I got perhaps the benefit of having been around and having been a practitioner in those type of transactions right at the very first wave. And when the Asian financial crisis hit and things went horribly wrong, most of those structures that some of us had been party to putting together, we saw them implode. come 2008, when the subprime crisis triggered in the United States came through. Again, I was still a practitioner, so I can say that I've lived through as an
but in short,
investment
it did
banker
benefit only
through
a small hand of people.
But the point I want to make is this: in all of that, the black people, what they thought was an oasis in terms of an investment, unfortunately was a mirage in the manner in which it was put together. And we've now largely as a country legislated exclusion. If I say to you, and the reason why most companies are not even reaching the 26% is because we have legislated that black people who are in the majority can only own directly and control only 26% of the corporate sector in this country. And that is certainly an erroneous idea. We hear things that sometimes that the politicians say, for example, we want BEE, we don't want enrichment. Now, if you are investing, you invest for one reason and one reason only, to make money. You sell your investment for 1,001 reasons, but they get locked in. Exaro is a case in point, whereby the people were locked in and now they are coming up with a new structure. ESCOM is unhappy. We discussed it right here. So the point I'm saying is this: we need the government that is ANC-led, that can have the gumption to include those of us who have been practitioners, who know what went wrong and what went right, to be able to work together to put in place mechanisms that can ensure that empowerment happens for sure. Will they have the courage to do that? No. But on this issue that has been raised, I think the challenge goes out to the ANC Youth League. They have now effectively made these allegations yesterday. The question is that, well, are they going to be approaching the public protector, and if so, when? Because it will be a proper forum to deal with these issues that they are raising, lest they shave both Deputy President Ramaphosa and Minister Pravin Gordhan's heads in their absence, and that is not acceptable. So will they go to the public protector? Will go to law enforcement? Or will they write to cabinet? Because, by the way, these two are members of cabinet, and if there is that conflict and they've got evidence, it is important that due process must follow. And I think that's what we are asking for. The same way we're doing even on the FICA bill, that if there is no due process, you are going to be arbitrarily treated. And it cannot be for their constitutional rights that these two get accused without any evidence, dealt and handled in a proper forum. And we believe that forum might be the public protector or a cabinet or even a law enforcement agent.
And as you're saying, these preposterous statements being made politically, it just adds to the whole narrative that these are conspiracy theories and it's from one nemesis to another, that it's all political, and it deviates from the elephant in the room, in the sense that transformation is still an issue 23 years later. And we have the ANC Youth League, Mlondi Mkhize, on the line. Mlondi, thanks so much. We're just talking about having substantial evidence in what you're saying, that Pravin Gordhan and Cyril Ramaphosa are essentially trying to collapse SAA so that it would be sold off cheaper to a private investor or service provider.
Well, first of all, let us clear what seems to be a misunderstanding. We never said that Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa and Comrade Pravin want to collapse SAA, but we said that the action of Treasury is an indication that it wants to privatize SAA while it remains a state-owned entity. The reason why we said that is because when you look at the people who are at Bidvest, we did in fact look further after the interview yesterday. We then discovered that in fact Comrade Pravin Gordhan is still part of the people, and in fact he has declared in the financial year of 2015 of having an interest at Bidvest. Now, when you get a consultant, that is February, which is part of the board, and bring some people who are in ABSA, and you make them to be part of the board of SAA as a rescue kind of a mission, because it was sent to Treasury for a turnaround strategy. You then, as that advisory institution suggests, that Bidvest must then be given all forms of things that SAA provides. That to us is a problem, because it seeks to suggest that instead of helping the institution to be an independent public institution, instead you want to privatize some of its components and you want to give it to certain institutions. Fortunately or unfortunately, those institutions have got people that are shareholders or that have got interest in them while they serve in government. To us, that is a problem as the ANCYL. Just the last point to make on this matter is that so far as we are concerned, we have conducted some form of verification process. Thus far, and we'll tell you this change, thus far we could not find the name of the Deputy President as part of the shareholders of Bidvest or a PE partner at Bidvest. So that was an error in communication of the UT. But we can safely confirm that the Minister of Finance is part of the people that are part of Bidvest as yet declared in 2015 in Parliament.
Mlondi,
so that is how
Sorry,
yes.
Tsepo here was just saying that you have all these instruments at your disposal to ensure that the information required for people to digest and debate in terms of conflict of interest with ministers that are not driving the transformation agenda. What are you going to do? Is the next step going to the public protector, or is this just going to be another regurgitation a week from now?
Well, first of all, I think as the Youth League, our firm position is that we ought to engage internally in the African National Congress. Part of the things that we are trying to refine building up to a policy conference is the fact that we ought now to make assessment of comrades deployed in government yearly. What do they get? How much were they worth when they entered government? How much are they worth when they leave government? Where is their interest? And we don't necessarily put comrades under difficult conditions of deploying them in institutions and areas where they will be conflicted so that they are able to adjudicate their responsibility without any conflict of interest.
Okay, but you, sorry, Mlondi, a call for cabinet reshuffle and what the ramifications thereof would be. There's stories murmuring or roaming around that it's likely that the likes of Derek Hanekom and Pravin Gordhan may be recalled. Maybe this is something that's still on the cards.
Cabinet reshuffle cannot bring about the end of the world. It's not possible. The various people who are deployed as ministers in government, they are not the government. They are simply civil servants. So when they are moved, they are not the institution. If they are hit by the proverbial bus, and in this case called the reshuffling, life goes on. Those ministries will continue to function. But in the specific case of what President Zuma is facing now, with his first cabinet Lokota coming up, I simply just cannot see what type of a cabinet Lokota he's going to have with people who had just humiliated him publicly by telling him that he was not worthy of being a leader, and by people who at the end of the day they're supposed to be serving at his pleasure. I don't know what type of a thing. So effectively, if there is no cabinet reshuffle, or if there is no, in fact, ensuring that those that have humiliated him are no longer in position, I just cannot see how President Zuma can hold course as head of state with the respect and the authority that goes with that office. He just simply will not have it. That is a reality. We should not even be denying it. Those that took that decision should have foreseen the outcome and the impact of their decision. Therefore, by their failure to fall on their swords, simply has put us in a state of paralysis as a country. The question must be asked of them now. Since they failed to fall on their sword after their failed coup, do they really care about this country? And I can go and assert that their action can lead us to believe that they don't care about this country. I just want to also make one correction. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa founded and led Shanduka. Shanduka was a significant black economic empowerment shareholder in Bidvest. So the comments by the Youth League were not out of place. The point I made is this: when Deputy President Ramaphosa became Deputy President of the Republic only, not when he was Deputy President of the ANC, then he said, I will be disposing of my equity interest, which included the sale in Bidvest. Now, there hasn't been any disclosure as to when was the Bidvest stake sold, on which day, because this is a public company, and ordinarily there should have been a SENS announcement on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange that would have said, yes, Shanduka is no longer a shareholder and what those shares were sold for. So that lack of disclosure, unfortunately, the Deputy President needs to handle it, because otherwise he's going to continue to build up this cloud around him, which is not necessary.
Yeah, it's one thing to disown yourself from a company, but the relationship would all still remain, be it in a non-executive position, which then could be another motivation for SAA to go with Bidvest. We still decry the issue that there's only 2% of SAA procurement that goes to African black-owned businesses, and yet we see the perpetuation of a monopoly. It's like regressing in a way.
Yeah, actually, that's a very important element, and not only in SAA, but in all other spaces. And if you look at the loudmouths in this country, they don't want us to talk about that. They want us to talk about an individual.
Yes.
So if you go to SAA, you don't hear a discussion around when are we going to make sure that the procurement, you use procurement as an instrument to make sure that there's a sharing of wealth, there's a sharing of resources. That is not a discussion that you'll find in the media. That is not a discussion that you'll find among those who are deployed in the media to actually find something wrong with certain individuals.
Well, we certainly bring it up here, Professor Siep. I'm sorry, as the saying goes, but as always, appreciate your time and insight. This is the discussion that will continue for as long as the economic transformation has not reached equilibrium in this country. You can rest assured that Africa News Network will be focusing on that. And thanks to you at home for watching. For now, though, we take a quick ad break, and Clive Ramatibela Smith is up next with BizPulse.